Chapter 2. Again, this is the early 1900s, so we probably learned a lot since then. The proper conditions, light, temperature, and moisture. So a lot of this is historical. After so much advice as to the possibility of making conditions right for the growing of plants in the house, the inexperienced reader will naturally want to know what these conditions are. Light. In the first place, almost all plants, whether they flower or not, must have an abundance of light, and many require sunshine, especially during the dull days of winter. Plants without sufficient light never make a normal, healthy growth. The stems are long, lanky, and weak. The foliage has a semi-transparent, washed-out look, and the whole plant falls an easy victim to disease or insect enemies. Even plants grown in the full light of a window, as everyone with any experience in managing them knows from observation, will draw toward the glass and become one-sided with the leaves all facing one way. Therefore, even with the best conditions, it is necessary to turn them half about every few days, preferably every time they are watered, in order that they may maintain an even, shapely growth. As a rule, the flowering plants, such as geraniums and heliotropes, require more light and sunshine than those grown for foliage, such as palms, ferns, and the decorative leaved begonias. It is almost impossible during the winter months to give any of them too much sunlight, and where there is any danger of this, as sometimes happens in early fall or late spring, a curtain of the thinnest material will give them ample protection, the necessity being not to exclude the light, but simply to break the direct action of the sun's rays through glass. A great variety of plants may be grown in the ordinary window garden, for which the sunniest and broadest window available should be selected. There are two methods of handling the plants. They may be kept as individual specimens in pots and dishes or pans, which are nothing more or less than shallow flower pots, or they may be grown together in a plant box, made for the purpose and usually more or less decorative in itself. That will harmonize with and set off the beauty of the plants. The latter method, that of growing in boxes, offers two distinct advantages, especially where there is likely to be encountered too high a temperature and consequent dryness in the air. The plants are more easily cared for than they are in pots, which rapidly dry out and need frequent changing, and effects in grouping and harmonious decoration may be had which are not readily secured with plants in pots. On the other hand, it is not possible to give such careful attention to individual plants which may require it as when they are grown in pots. Nor can there be so much rearrangement and change when these are required. And what good housekeeper is not a natural-born scene-shifter? Every once and so often rolling the piano around to the other side of the room and moving the bookcase or changing the big Boston fern over to the other window so it can be seen from the dining room. If the plants are to be kept in pots, and on the whole this will generally be the more satisfactory method, several shelves of light, smooth wood of a convenient width, 6 to 12 inches, should be firmly placed, by means of the common iron brackets in each window to be used. It will help both in keeping the pots in place and in preventing muddy water from dripping down to the floor or table below. If a thin, narrow strip of wood is nailed to each edge of these shelves, extending an inch or two above them, a couple of coats of outside paint will also add to the looks and to the life of these shelves, and further tend to prevent any annoying drip from draining pots. Such a shelf will be still further improved by being covered an inch or two deep with coarse gravel or fine pebbles. If possible, it is well to have the house plants in a place where the moisture and temperature can be regulated for them alone. In almost any house, it is possible to arrange a wide sill with a metal or tile bottom where houseplants may be properly cared for. The proper conditions. This is much better than the use of pot saucers, especially for small pots. Where a bay window is used, if cut off from the room by glass doors, or even by curtains, it will aid greatly in keeping a moist atmosphere about the plants and preventing dust from settling on the leaves when sweeping or dusting is being done. A window box can readily be made of planed inch pine boards, tightly fitted and tightly joined. It should be 6 to 10 inches wide and 6 to 8 inches deep. If a plain box is used, it will be necessary to bore inch holes every 6 inches or so through the bottom to provide for carrying off of any excess of water. Although, with the method of filling the box described in a later chapter, those holes would hardly ever be called into service. Plants in the house in the winter, however, are as likely to suffer from too much water as from too little, and therefore, to prevent the disagreeable possibility of having dirty drainage water running down onto several feet of floor, it would be almost as easy and far better to have the box constructed with a bottom made of 2 pieces, sloping slightly to the center where one hole is made in which a cork can be kept. A false bottom of tin or zinc with the requisite number of holes cut out and supported by 3 or 4 inch strips of wood running lengthways of the box supplies the drainage. These strips must, of course, be cut in the middle to allow all the water to drain out. The false bottom will take care of any ordinary surplus of water, which can be drained off into a watering can or pitcher by taking out the cork. The details of construction of such a box are shown in Figure 1. It will be best to have the box so placed upon its supporting brackets that it can be changed occasionally end for end, thus keeping the plants growing evenly and not permitting the blooms continually to turn their backs to the inside of the room. So Figure 1, the box for plants. AC is the false zinc bottom, AB, CB, slanting bottom to drain water out at hole B. With the above simple provisions, one may take advantage of all the light to be had in an ordinary window. Occasionally, a better place may be found ready to hand, such as the bay window illustrated facing page 8, or such as that described in the preceding chapter. or those mentioned in the first chapter of Part 2, page 146. The effort demanded will always be repaid many times by greater ease and greater success in the management of plants and by the wider scope permitted. Temperature. Next in importance to light is the matter of temperature. The ordinary house plants, to be kept in health, require a temperature of 65 to 75 degrees during the day and 50 to 55 degrees at night. Frequently, it will not be possible to keep the room from going lower at night, but it should be kept as near that as possible. 45 degrees occasionally will not do injury, and even several degrees lower will not prove fatal. But if frequently reached, the plants will be checked and seem to stand still. Plants in the dormant or semi-dormant condition are not so easily injured by low temperature as those in full growth. Also, plants which are quite dry will stand much more cold than those in moist soil. The proper condition of temperature is the most difficult thing to regulate and maintain in growing plants in the house. There is, however, at least one room in almost every house where the night temperature does not often go below 45 or 50 degrees, and if necessary, all plants may be collected into one room during very cold weather. Another precaution which will often save them is to move them away from the windows. Put sheets of newspaper inside the panes, not, however, touching the glass, as a dead air space must be left between them. Where there is danger of freezing, a kerosene lamp or stove left burning in the room overnight will save them. Never, when the temperature outside is below freezing, should plants be left where leaves or blossoms may touch the glass. As with the problem of light, so with that of temperature, the specially designed place for plants, no matter how small or simple a little nook it may be, offers greater facility for furnishing the proper conditions. But it is, of course, not imperative, and as I have said, there is probably not one home in 20 where a number of sorts of plants cannot be safely carried through the winter. Moisture. It would seem at first thought that the proper condition of moisture could be furnished as easily in the house as anywhere. And so it can be as far as applying water to the soil is concerned. But the air in most dwellings in winter is terribly deficient in moisture. The fact that a room is so dry that plants cannot live in it should sound a warning to us who practically live there for days at a time. But it does not, and we continued to contract all sorts of nose and throat troubles, to say nothing of more serious diseases. No room too dry for plants to live in is fit for people to live in. Hot air and steam heating systems especially produce an over-dry condition of the atmosphere. This can be overcome to a great or complete extent by thorough ventilation and by keeping water constantly where it can evaporate, over radiators, etc. This should be done for the sake of your own health, if not for that of the plant. Further information as to watering and ventilation will be found in Chapter 7. But before we get anxious about just how to take care of plants, we must know how to get them. And before getting them, we must know what to give them to grow in. The plant's foundation, So for a little, we must be content with those prosaic, but altogether essential matters of soil, manures and fertilizers, which in the next chapter I shall try to make clear in as brief manner as possible.